good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us today. I'm Rachel Kay, Managing Partner at Finn Partners, and I oversee much of our CPG business. I've specialized in food and beverage communications for more than 20 years. I like to cap it right there, but it's probably a little more than that. I'm delighted to welcome you all today to Food Tech Future Forward. Today's conversation is all about the future of food, the trends, technologies, and investments reshaping the way people eat, live, and stay healthy. We'll be exploring billion-dollar bets and breakthrough innovations from some of the world's largest food companies, alongside data-driven insights that can help entrepreneurs and partners understand where the opportunities lie. To help set the stage, Matthieu Vincent, co-founder of Digital FoodLab, is going to share insights from his 2025 Food Tech Investment Report. He's going to give us some highlights from that research to give us a big picture view of the current investment landscape. Then we'll turn to our distinguished panel of leaders driving innovation and partnerships across 4 global giants. With us today is Charlie Chappell. He leads global innovation and R&D at the Hershey Company, shaping innovation for some of the world's most iconic chocolate and snacking brands. Also with us is Otsuka Ryuta. He previously led new business development at Calbee, where he launched initiatives such as personalized nutrition services through collaborations with startups. He now continues to lead food and health initiatives with a wellness focus at the Nisshin Oillio Group Ltd. Luba Safran is also with us today, and she is the venture capital lead at Mondelēz International, focused on investing in companies that can help drive the future of snacking. And finally, Toru Kawahatsu, we're going to call him Hatu, is how he prefers, leads open innovation and partnering activities at Meiji Holdings Company Limited, where he advances innovations linking nutrition, wellness, and sustainable growth. So just touching on the agenda for today, first, we're going to get that data-driven introduction from Matthieu on the state of food tech investment. Then we'll jump into our panel discussion with Charlie, Otsuka, Luba, and Hatu on trends and technologies and strategies driving their company's innovation bets. And then we'll have an open Q&A with you, our audience. So please submit your questions in the chat throughout the session. We'll try to get through as many as possible at the end. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Matthieu.
Thank you. So I'll just share my screen. I think it should be working now. So thank you for the time and for the invite. So as Rachel just said, the goal is today to give you a brief introduction about what's happening in the agri-food tech ecosystem as a whole. A quick intro. My name is Matthieu, co-founder of Digital FoodLab. I've been working in this space for the past 15 years, initially as a founder, creating my own startup. And then with Digital FoodLab, we are basically doing consulting with most of the large agri-food companies globally, helping them to understand what's happening in this agri-food ecosystem. It will be very brief today, but everything that I will be touching on is available on our website. So if you want to more insight, you can just go there. So this was a brief intro. Let's jump directly into the topic. What are we talking about when we say food tech? I think it's always good to just go back and give a few brief elements of intro. So in our mind, that's the definition that we wrote about 10 years ago. Food tech is the ecosystem of innovation around the whole agri-food value chain, from agriculture to new food products, including alternative proteins, new CPG brands, and also delivery, things that are connected to health and appliances, etc., etc. So very broad ecosystem. So what are we talking about? But even going back further a bit, I think it's always good to wonder or to re-ask why are we talking about it. So very briefly, because I'm quite sure that on the panel it's obvious, but on the audience it's also kind of obvious you're already aware about these topics. But we feel that what we often say that food tech is the future of food, and we say that because food needs somehow a new future, or at least a different path. There is a problem with the current trends that we are going into, notably that climate change is related to the way we eat today and we produce food. There is a challenge around aging. Also, we have an increasingly aging population, and also health-related issues. our current food system makes a lot of people um, health going in the wrong direction. And there is also a challenge that is much more felt by the industry than from consumers, but a challenge around value distribution. So there are all these conditions for what we call the perfect storm, or the a way to a need to change the way food is being made and distributed. What we've seen in the past 5 or 6 or 5 to 10 years even is that it's not coming disruptions are coming from the food ecosystem, but indeed from outside, from startups notably, and that's why we say that food tech is the future of food. And as also you've probably have seen, it's mostly the large agri-food companies, hence this panel today, that at some point should have to scale the innovation. So we know what we're talking about and why we're talking about it. But if we say that food tech is the future of food, looking at the past year or so, we can say that it's a future that is not in great shape. If you just open any media outlet talking about food tech, it's mostly talking about startups going bankrupt or going down. So no, what's happening to this future? When we talk about innovation, the most reliable data that we have is indeed funding. So it's a way to compare, let's say, an ecosystem over time and ecosystems among each other. So what you have on screen is our latest data points on the state of the agri-food tech innovation ecosystem. As you can see, we have 3 phases: slow and steady growth, excitement around COVID, and then very strong decrease. Just to give you an idea, almost 80% decrease between 21 and 25. So definitely not in great shape, the food tech ecosystem. This explains why so many startups are going down. There is just much less money. And if we try to understand where this money is going, or at least where the remaining money is going, it's still a very much North America concentrated ecosystem. And what is kind of surprising, it's the dominance of the US and North America is increasing over time. So normally we could have expected, okay, innovation is coming from there, and maybe we should see relay ecosystem coming from other areas, but that's not what we are observing right now. The US ecosystem is doing quite well, in the rest of the world, not so much. If we look also at the distribution in terms of categories, if you remember my example and definition with the different categories, so when there was a huge excitement around food tech, notably during COVID, it was mostly going towards delivery startups, and in blue, alt protein startups. Nowadays, as you can see, it's delivery startups which are raising much less money, but it's still affecting all the other categories. So, as I said, an ecosystem that is not doing specifically well. And we have even something which is a bit more worrying if we look at inside the data, so where the money is going in terms of maturity of startups. To put it briefly, what remains of funding is going towards kind of mature startups. So why is it worrying? It means that there is much less money going towards seed and Series A, which means early stage young venture. So future rising stars are not finding funds today to develop themselves, etc., etc. So that's a new movement, something that we are observing since the start of the year, late 24, start of the year 25. It can change, but it's kind of worrying for the medium long-term future. So, as I said, a lot of things are going wrong. What's behind that? So, first, it's not something 100% specific to food. If you look at tech, excluding AI, you have exactly the same pattern. So there is a challenge around tech funding right now. It's due to larger geopolitical, economical reasons. So that's number one. And number two, there are some kind of challenges which are related 100% to food tech. First, there are too few exits, so too many startups end up without large agri-food companies acquiring them, maybe because they had a too big evaluation. But there is a problem there. There is a problem around funding and scaling up biotech-like startups. So we don't have the solutions to scale up these new technologies. It's a bit like in the 80s and 90s, we had a first bubble around clean energy. A lot of startups developing solar panels, principally in the US, in Europe, etc., and most of them just went bankrupt. We are pretty much in this phase in agri-food where there is a lack of relay funding to scale up the industry. So kind of specific. Now, that was the situation. If we look in the review, if we kind of want to go further, what you have on the screen is our view of the different trends that are shaping up the agri-food tech ecosystem. So too many of them to comment them in a minute. But what I can say, and which is kind of a good news, if you look at the left part of this curve, you still see a lot of emerging trends, emerging new ecosystems. Even nowadays, with much less funding, we still see stuff emerging out of universities, out of research, which are getting traction. So it's far from being the end. There is a funding crunch, a lot of issues, but a lot of things are happening. And in her area that are concerning our guest today, with things like plant cell culture for cocoa or other kind of alternatives, which are obviously very exciting topics, which are getting traction. So, what can we expect next in a few words? We don't expect any bounce back in terms of funding, at least this year, maybe next year if things get better. But somehow the ecosystem is still showing a lot of resilience. As I said, there is still a lot of innovation. There are some areas that are doing well, notably in healthy aging, in shortage alternatives like cocoa alternative, coffee alternative, egg protein alternatives. And somehow, even in this kind of gloom, corporate involvement is rising. We have guests today on the round table showing that they have high interest in innovation, which is something great, showing that, okay, the startup ecosystem or the funding ecosystem is not doing well, but there is higher involvement from agri-food companies, which is very, very good indeed. So, yep. As I said, a very quick intro. All the insights are available on Digital FoodLab website. And if you have any question, please feel free to reach out.
Thanks, Matthieu. Those were some great insights. And I know we have a lot of entrepreneurs on the webinar today. So I know a lot of that is probably not necessarily new news, but it's interesting to see it all pulled together. Thanks. A lot of food for thought, no pun intended. Let's jump into our panel discussion. So, Ryuta, I'm going to start with you. We know that snacking continues to grow as a dominant category. Consumer expectations shift very quickly, though. What is the single biggest trend that you're watching right now that you believe is going to reshape how people eat and live, at least for the near future?
Okay, so first of all, thank you for joining this webinar. Here in Tokyo, it's already 10 p.m. But don't worry, I'm wide awake because because this topic is too exciting to fall asleep on. So and I would say I think the personalized nutrition it's a future trend, as Matthieu said, and so with new technology and research, it's getting easier and more affordable to understand our own health status. As Rachel introduced me, that I previously worked at Kirby as a new business development leader, and the highlight of my work at Kirby was the launch of body granola. So let me explain a little bit about body granola because it's I think it's one of the example for the like I say, the personalized nutrition service. So body granola is a let me see. So body granola is a personalized nutrition service. So it begins with a gut microbiome test. And each person's intestinal flora is unique. So and it influences health conditions and such as immunity and metabolism and even mental balance. So after the test, the customers receive a detailed report and recommendation for the right type of granola. It's a prebiotics topping. So the granola itself is not so one size fits all. So it's customized with prebiotic toppings that match the consumer's gut type. So the customers can select three toppings, three previous toppings for their base granola. So making it both functional and they can select so it's enjoyable. So I think at Kabi, we launched this project with two major startups, Japanese cutting-edge startups, which is Metagen and Saikinso. So Metagen is a company that focuses on gut microbiome science, and they developed methods to analyze each person's gut flora. And Saikinso is a partner that they conduct one of Japan's largest gut flora testing operations. So, and Kirby, of course, they have a lot of knowledge about production. So Metagen's scientific analysis and Saikinso's testing capacity. So we built body granola together with among scientific basis.
Great example, Ryuta.
Yeah. Yes.
I appreciate that because there are a lot of people that are very interested in gut health, and there's still a lot of mystery around it. So I love that observation. Charlie, what's the trend that you're keeping your eye on right now?
Yeah, I would say it's probably in a similar space, but from a broader sense, I would say functional foods. So I think we're moving past the era of free from foods and more of like what are the additives. And the easiest place that you're seeing this, at least here in the US where I am, is protein, where basically I think the challenge in this, as I'm thinking from an entrepreneurial standpoint, is what's coming after that. And how do you get in front of the different ingredients that are going to be providing functional benefits in food before the trend goes too far? I mean, protein now is in everything. It's kind of ridiculous how far it's gone to where I think you're going to start to see, typically when that happens, you start to see then a consumer pushback against it as the land settles. But yeah, that's the biggest thing I'm seeing is added functional benefits to our food.
Great observation, Charlie. I know that you have a bowl of protein popcorn sitting next to your desk. So, okay. And that's a great entry into my next question. I'm going to ask Hatu to answer this. Health and wellness means very different things to different consumers today. Keto, that protein, everything that Charlie was talking about, functional ingredients, which he also mentioned, clean label. So how do you see the definition of healthy evolving, and what does that mean for your innovation strategy?
Okay, thank you, Rachel. And as you commented, the concept of healthy is changing over time in food industry. I think in the past it was just low calorie or low sugar for mass marketing. But today it is more and more diverse and increasingly personalized, as Matthieu and Ryuta commented. I also think personalization is the key to consider future healthy. Today, wearable devices collect your own data and give you personalized recipe on what you should do today. And you just follow this AI recommendation, such as eating good food, doing 30-minute exercise or sleeping for 7 hours. I expect this personalization trend will continue and will be accelerated more and more. However, at the same time, there are many people who don't want to make those efforts to get good health. So entrepreneurs, if you can develop foods, for example, by eating those foods, you will have the same effect as 1 hour exercise or 2 hours good sleep. That will be really innovative. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Great insights. Thank you, Hatu. Okay, I'm going to switch gears. Luba, given how quickly perceptions can change, sometimes from a single viral TikTok, which, hello, cottage cheese, how do you balance jumping on immediate consumer trends with making longer term bets that may take years to materialize, but may have more staying power? I compare it to day trading versus that long-term exposure.
So I will, as an individual, I'm very susceptible to all trends. And so I do want to make cottage cheese everything. And I have tried making cottage cheese some things, and I cannot say that it turns out very well. So there have been additions to my compost bin. But from a corporate perspective, I think, right, so I work in a very large organization. So we have the benefit of having different teams that operate on different time horizons. And I think when you think about, let's say, TikTok driven things, right, that's generally can be addressed by marketing. You have teams that can do social media. You can take things into store and do certain displays in store. And those things have fairly fast turnaround times. And so it can be really easy, relatively speaking, to respond. I think that the things that pop on TikTok, you have to ask yourself why, right? Like there's something underneath that is so catchy. Like, why is everyone so excited? If we take your cottage cheese example, my hypothesis is protein is huge, and people are gaining an awareness that cottage cheese is a natural source of protein, right? And so it's a whole food way of getting protein. It perceives itself to be a fairly like old-fashioned traditional food that hasn't gone through a lot of processes. And I think that's, if I were to hypothesize off the top of my head, that's what's driving cottage cheese. And so I think you think about what's the underlying why, and then the long-term investment goes behind the underlying why. So I would say here we see it, but a really strong desire for nutrition, fundamental nutrition, as Charlie said, the added functional benefits. It's the added functional benefit of nutrition through additional food formats. And so if I can eat a bread or a pancake out of cottage cheese, and it's so much better for me than a traditional bread or cottage cheese, that's a delightful thing. I think the how to balance comes out almost on its own because we're a big organization, we don't pivot that quickly. So you aren't able to respond to every TikTok and throw yourself after every TikTok, even if you wanted to. And I think there's actually kind of something good there. If I avoided as an individual every fad diet that was on TikTok, I would be in better shape. So I think there's also like an infrastructure limitation to it.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. And I love the idea that TikTok gives the opportunity for consumers and influencers to create new usage occasions for products that maybe we've been using for years. Charlie, I'd love to get your thought on the same question, how quickly perceptions can change. How do you gamble from an innovation standpoint with making longer term bets rather than, those that may expire quickly?
Yeah, Luba made some excellent points about how large organizations has to handle that. In my particular world where I'm focusing on product innovation, what it's come down to is we have to go and evaluate those trends and decide, is that something we do want to go pursue and at what point? And a lot of it gets into underlying what's behind it, everything else. But then it's like, how long is this going to stay? And if we avoid it, is it going to impact our business? And so, then it comes down to taking what typically at large companies is very difficult to do, very long processes that are put in place in order to get a new product to market, and say, how do we get there faster? And we use this paradigm now of, project A, where is it on the spectrum from speed to perfection? Right. And then so we declare where it is, and then within the organization, that then guides the decision we make and what we need to do to get something to market. Because we're watching the entrepreneurs and recognize that they can get there faster. They just flat out can. And so that's really the approach that we take as we go through this, but we make it on a case-by-case basis because, as Luba said, you just simply can't follow every trend. There's plenty of graveyards of brands and companies that tried to follow trends and then they followed them too far, and then it ended up leading to their demise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's probably why the Hershey Company has iconic products that have been pantry staples for decades and decades. So makes a lot of sense. Hatu, we're going to switch the conversation to technology and innovation. Which emerging technologies, and I'm thinking things like AI, biotech, alternative proteins, do you see as having the greatest potential to disrupt food and snacking in the next few years?
Yeah, it's very difficult to predict. But in addition to the technology that you mentioned, I personally see two areas. First is microbiome science. As Ryuta-san already commented and you said, microbiome is a very mysterious world, but it's the last frontier for food industry, I think. And advances in gut health science will realize more and more personalized solutions in, for example, probiotics and probiotics field. And second is anti-obesity solutions. Obesity is always the number one concern among consumers. So solutions for example, body fat control or sugar reduction will continue to be the source of innovation, like GLP-1. So, but I hear there are many entrepreneurs in audiences, and I hope them to always remember one important thing. That is, no matter how science and technologies are advanced, consumers will seek delicious solutions. So if your product doesn't taste good, you cannot make money. So after all, in our industry, taste is king. So I hope you always keep this in mind. That's my opinion.
That's an important point about taste. And I love that we have 2 votes for gut health. So sounds like this is something we need to be keeping an eye on. Ryuta, many entrepreneurs in this audience are building innovative products and technologies. When you're evaluating partnerships with startups, what makes a collaboration successful from your perspective?
Yeah, I think there's no magic formula, but it's very basic. But I think we need, first of all, we need a clear and shared goal between us, and we have to know each other very well. So the company, usually the big company, the speed is not very slow, but the startup is the speed is very fast. But we have to, like I say, we should have complementary strengths, and so that we can focus on what we do best, and of course communication is very crucial. We should treat each other as professionals and as equal partners, and it helps to agree early on KPIs, timelines, and how we handle maybe IP and data. So we also look at readiness for the real world, regulatory fit or quality and safety, supply chain and pilot design. So if we align on these points, I think the chance of success is much higher, I guess.
Great points. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to pass the baton over to Luba because I want to get some insights from this investment lens that she looks through. Luba, what areas of food tech and wellness are you finding most attractive right now?
Well, we all listened to Matthieu's intro. So I think it's important to define what we mean by attractive. And I think for me, what's attractive comes from the fact that I am a corporate venture capitalist, right? So that means that I'm investing on behalf of Mondelēz as a strategic entity. We do not necessarily have the same objectives or restrictions as a traditional financial investor. So if I was Matthieu or other people who are like outside food VCs, I think it is a very hard space to find attractive right now because companies are having a hard time raising, so they're falling apart. There are not that many exits, so it's hard to get your money back. Like, I think if people view it as a purely financial play, it's hard to say where to bet right now, to be honest. We have the benefit that we're looking for long-term strategic advantage from Mondelēz when we're participating in venture capital. So it's really like, what are the spaces that are interesting to us where there is startup activity? And I think from that perspective, it is very much what we've heard on the panel today. I think gut health, it's a very broad phrase because it's so big and so meaningful and we know so little about it. And I think that the more we learn, the more we will understand how big it actually is. And it's going to make protein look like a drop in a puddle. So I think everything around gut health, technology-wise, has been discussed about wearables, sensors, et cetera. And then solutions for gut health is huge and of great interest to us. And I think it's still very early days. And I think even on Matthieu's curve, it was on the up part. I think on a more tactical execution point, protein, yes, protein is big. I would say it's like, I would call protein nutrition, right? Because I think one day it's keto, one day it's protein, one day it's something else, but there is this real desire for nutrition. Food is wellness, which connects to all of those things, right? Which is like, how can food make you better? And, food has traditionally done that. That's why people eat, is because it makes you healthy and it sustains you. So how can we keep building the value within that? And then I would say sustainability technologies, right? Because all of us have public ESG commitments that we've made to shareholders that we need to deliver on. Consumers are asking for it as well. It can drive efficiency as well if it's done right. So it could be like a win-win-win if you get it right. So sustainability enablers as well would be probably the last area.
Awesome. I think there's probably a lot of entrepreneurs on this webinar that are very excited about those observations. So thinking about, macroeconomic factors like shifting consumer behavior, regulatory frameworks, the supply chain challenges that have been going on for some time now, how does that kind of shape your strategy in terms of investment?
It makes it more difficult and it also makes it more interesting. So I think from a consumer perspective, inflationary pressures on food are so widespread right now. And we used to think about affordability as like a developing market issue, and it is no longer a developing market issue. So when I'm looking for investment opportunities, for me, that means essentially business model innovation of like, who can bring food to market in a cheaper to produce way for them, which means we can then pass on the affordability to the consumer. And I think business model innovation is often neglected on the CPG side, but it has its role to play. And how can we make this stuff affordable again, which is people's expectation fundamentally of the food category. So if anyone has startups in that space, please bring them to me. Supply chain challenges, I think some of the stuff that's happened since COVID is stuff no one thought would ever happen, right? Like that you just can't buy certain things or they're not available. Like that's not a concept that we are used to. And I think it has created a justification to invest, as we spoke earlier about the short term versus the long term, in longer term technological innovation that really revamps fundamental aspects of how we bring these products to market, which is an expensive and long term process for us to commit to, but that you can justify because the world is no longer operating the way that you had assumed that it would. So it is definitely shaping our investment strategy. And I think these things are they're not passing trends. To the earlier question of is this a TikTok viral thing versus a larger push? I think these are larger systemic things that are kind of here to stay.
Okay. Well, that's not the best news, but Hopefully we're going to return to some level of
startups on this call and startups in general are there to fix that, right? They're there to say, okay, we have problems, but we can come with innovative solutions to those problems and help make things better for everyone. So hopefully the people on this call are going to solve it.
Yeah, I know there's some great innovators on this call, so I hope you're right. Okay, I'm going to shift gears to health and consumer perceptions. Charlie, I'm going to ask you this question. Consumers are increasingly influenced by health and wellness content on social media, which we've already talked a little bit about, but sometimes it's accurate and sometimes it's heavy in misinformation. How do you navigate the tension between science and perception, and how do you help consumers make informed choices?
Yeah, it's a great question that I think everybody is having to deal with because, as I like to say, this is sort of the reality we face. All it takes is one TikToker with enough of an audience to say a food or an ingredient is bad. And if enough people follow it, then you have to deal with it. And so it's a much more volatile situation than it used to be. The way we've addressed this here internally at Hershey is to create some principles, and they're really kind of simple in a way. It starts with simply, we will not compromise on safety or quality. Okay. So to start off with, and that's been, and I think every major food company is that way. It's been in our DNA forever that we're not going to compromise on that no matter what anyone says about, any products or ingredients or things like that. So that's the first principle. But then the next two is we're going to make our decisions. We are going to listen to the science and we are going to look at the science, but we're also going to listen to consumers and what they want. And so at the end of the day, what we need to do in our portfolio is offer choice. So if there are certain consumers that, want to avoid certain ingredients, then how do we provide products in our portfolio that do that versus others so that consumers have that choice of what they want to do? So we use those principles when anything comes up. We basically put that through those set of principles that basically guides what our actions are going to be.
Okay, great. And thinking about something that I think's been talked a lot about recently in social media is that processed versus ultra processed foods. It's a hot topic. We've been eating perfectly healthy processed foods for many years, but it's always had kind of this negative connotation. From your perspective, how should the industry address consumer concerns, but while still innovating?
Yeah, this is also difficult because the definition of ultra processed foods is not clear. And if you follow the purest definition of it, then almost everything is processed. And so then as an entrepreneur on this call, you talk about food tech, all food tech is processed. So, it's a great challenge that's faced in the industry from that standpoint. So, I think a lot of this comes down to how you communicate the science behind either your product or your ingredients that you're bringing along to market. And this starts to get really important as you do this so that the consumer understands exactly what you're doing to the ingredient or the product so that they can make the decision if they're comfortable with that or not. And so a lot of this gets down to how you communicate that and whether that being you're a product and you're communicating directly to consumers, or whether even you're an ingredient manufacturer selling more from a B2B, you still have to think about this because everybody's reading labels now. Everybody's using apps like Yuka to look at this. And so at some point, no matter what you're doing, people are going to take a critical eye to the ingredient and how it's created to judge whether they think it's going to be useful or not. But all of us in the industry, we basically have to get to definitions of what processed really means. Because even kind of cheese can be considered processed to get to a latest health trend. So
Love that. And I love that you're empowering the consumer at the end of the day to make their own choices. But agreed, there still needs to be some more refined definitions of some of those things. Ryuta, looking ahead 5 to 10 years, what do you think the food ecosystem is going to look like? How will the way people snack, eat, and stay healthy be different from what it looks like today?
Yeah, I think as Matthieu said in the previous presentation, so that there are increasing function and healthier food in the market very recently, but unfortunately, the kind of obesity or such kind of health problem still increasing. Maybe because the people cannot eat light food for their health condition. So I expect more people will keep the light eating habits and that match their own health status instead of relying on the medicine only after problems happen. So people will aim to stay healthy through food, and this can extend healthy life expectancy. And I think, and also expert advice and digital services that support good habits will be, I think it will be common. So integrated with wearables and at-home tests and retail maybe. And at the same time, we should consider fairness and privacy and cost so everyone can benefit. So, and if we can combine science and good design and access, healthier choices will become the easy choices in daily life in the future.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Science is definitely key in order to develop the next innovation of the future. Charlie, for the entrepreneurs listening in, what advice would you give on how to break through, educate consumers, and build products and companies that stand the test of time? I know we've talked about this a little bit, but I'd love just a little more perspective on that.
Yeah, I think what I would say, and it's interesting because I'm both a technologist, but I'm also a marketer. And what I see happens a lot of times is, especially with technology, we get so enamored in the science and everything behind that, and we talk about it that way. But we don't, a lot of times I see people don't think about the time of how are they going to talk to the consumer about it. And the consumer has like 1 to 2 seconds at most to understand what it's about. So my advice to the entrepreneurs who are working out there is think about what your story to the consumer is going to be about your technology, the benefits that it's going to give them, and how do you tell that in a very short amount of time. And that may mean you need to work on that much sooner in the process than you normally would, because as you go through, if it comes across as purely scientific, that's what a lot of consumers are rejecting today. If it sounds chemical, they don't want it. And so that would be some of the biggest advice that I would give.
Charlie, I want to expand on that a little bit because you said you're also a marketer.
Yeah.
How critical do you think that marketing component is to launching and building a sustainable brand?
I think it goes hand in hand with the science of it and especially if you're trying to scale. Because what'll happen is I think what I typically see is like you're a startup, you first get a product out there. Your early adopters are going to go deep. They're going to understand. They're really going to be highly involved in what you're doing. But as you grow in scale and you go up that adoption curves, the later consumers won't. And so you've got to get your message and your benefits and everything that you're talking about down to something very succinct if your goal is to scale and not just play in a narrow market.
Great points. And then Hatu, if you had to make one bold prediction about the future of food tech, what would it be?
Okay, that's a very difficult question, but research in microbiome, genomics, and epigenomics and large cohort studies will continue to advance, I think. So big data from these fields will be piled up, accumulated, and those data will reveal not only correlations, but also causal links between food and health. So based on these insights and scientific insights, personalized solution will enable people to achieve health and longevity simply from what you eat. So this is the ultimate goal of food tech, I think. I hope this answers to your question.
Yeah, no, fantastic insights. Thank you. All right. Well, that concludes my questions, but I want to open it up to questions from our audience. So let's see if we have any questions. Let's see. All right. we have a question from David Wishnick. He asks for the full panel. Thank you for today's discussion. The themes around gut health, sustainability, and innovation are exactly where NutraBerry, which appears as his brand, is focused. We've developed an advanced milling platform that transforms agricultural byproducts into ultra-fine functional fibers and oils. We've already generated revenue and have even had to turn down orders due to demand. They were recently awarded a USDA STTR grant focused on the microbiome, and he's included a link in here if you want to take a look. He'd love some feedback on the direction, and I know you don't have enough information at this point to give any detailed feedback, but it sounds like the panel is in agreement that anything related to gut health is probably a strong starting point. Would anyone like to chime in on that?
I'll jump in. Yeah, I mean, I think yes, it's on au courant. I think in general, and not speaking specifically about NutraBerry, I think whenever we look at a technological innovation like this from an investment point of view, our question is always, in general, and again, not speaking about NutraBerry specifically, but like, is this, if it's aiming to replace or somehow substitute a current process or ingredient that we use, will we, like, what is the cost comparison essentially, right? And if it's going to cost more than whatever we use today, is that something that consumers are willing to pay more for? And so, again, I haven't delved into the details of this, but like, how it goes back to what Charlie said of how can you explain the benefit of this to consumers? If I can convey the benefit of this to consumers, then it's okay that you're charging more. I think a lot of technological innovations, the cost is more than what the current solutions are. And so how do you justify that either to the customer, which is ourselves, or to the consumer in ways that make people willing to pay for it? I think that's the question for entrepreneurs to answer, really.
Thank you, Luba. I hope, David, that was helpful. We have another question from Alex. Several of you have invested in plant cell culture. What makes you excited about this technology? Anyone care to chime in on that? Plant cell culture?
Okay, when it comes to the plant cell culture, recently Meiji invested in the California cultures, maybe one of the world's first company for cell culturing cacao cells, trying to make a chocolate from the cell culture. So I think from the sustainability point of view, and it is said that in 2050, cacao may be distinct because it's the area you can cultivate cacao is decreasing, and people who want to cultivate natural cacao is decreasing because it is not profitable. So in order to, and you may hear about the cacao crisis. So from this sustainability point of view and this supply crisis, we think it's worth in investing into this new technology. I hope this answers to your question, Alex-san.
Thank you, Hatu. We had another question come in during the panel. I'm not sure exactly which of the trends it was related to, but it refers to the elderly population and are the trends meeting the needs of that particular, we talk a lot about Gen Z, but what about that population? Does anyone want to chime in on that?
Okay, yeah, maybe Japan is the most rapidly aging country. So, and on the other hand, the number of children is rapidly decreasing anyway. So, from the demographic viewpoint, especially in Japan, of course, we have to come to terms with the trend or preferences of the elderly people. They are still a big market. That's our answer.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Hatu.
Add to that, I think it's for an investment ecosystem to exist, there has to be people making new ideas and companies, and then there has to be money flowing through, right? And Matthieu was highlighting the absence of money flowing through. this is an area where I would say there's an absence of startup activity. And if there was startup activity, I think they could be attracting investment dollars. And this is a demographic that is very pronounced in Japan, but it is also happening elsewhere as birth rates are declining in other markets as well. And I think there is enough investor awareness of what this could be if people put money behind it, and we're not seeing it play out yet. And I would encourage anyone who's looking for a white space to play, and I think this is a great one.
Thanks, Luba. That sounds like good news for the person asking the question. We had another question come in regarding food service, which I think is an interesting question. I have a ton of clients that are CPG packaged food brands that also have a very strong or investing more money into the food service side of food manufacturing. Is that something that you all have seen and increased energies into?
I would say for us, it's not as big a part of our portfolio as maybe some other food companies, but it's definitely one that is growing. And also, we see it as a lot of the work that we do is everything starts with the occasion. What's the occasion in which our product will be used? And for us, we see those are occasions that we can't reach with products that we manufacture and sell through traditional retailers. So that's our view of the importance of food service. The amount of your portfolio it's evolved in depends on, how many of those occasions pertain to the products that you sell. So yes, I think it's an area that gets, in certain industries, it gets a lot of focus. Probably more industries should pay more attention to it.
Okay, great. I think we have time for about one more question. So I'm going to ask about functional foods. We've talked about functional foods today. They're important. People are looking for their foods to provide more health and wellness value. Is it possible, or is it on the flip side, people are looking to their food too much to provide function, and we're over functioning our bodies, I think is the question that this person is wanting to know about, to the point where, we're over supplementing ourselves through food.
I'll jump. I think it's a great question. This is a non-scientific answer. I think that first of all, there's a tension between what we talked about in terms of desire for less processed, however you define that, and functional. The second, you're adding additives that are not normally present in something you are processing. And so there is an inherent tension in two current desires there that I think people are struggling to resolve for themselves, of like, what do you want? A bar that has 100 grams of protein in it, or would you like to eat an egg, right? Like what? And it's going to have 6 grams of protein in it. So I think there's a challenge in all of the things that people want around making themselves better. And then someone else had mentioned it on the panel, the challenge of like, you do want to do the work, right? Because there's also work involved in treating yourself well and making yourself healthy. And that's another tension. And I think you can have a protein bar that has 100 grams of protein in it, but the bioavailability of that, like, is your body able to absorb the 100 grams of protein that you ingest? And the answer is no. And will it make any difference to your health? Also, no. And did you actually have a protein deficiency to begin with? In most markets, no. So I think that, I don't know if we can go over supplementing per se, but there's definitely a lot of people are very close to the point where it already doesn't actually make the difference that you think it makes to your health. And reevaluating which interventions actually do, there is, I think, space for that for all of us. And that's what New Year's Day is for.
Mm-hmm. Great thoughts, Luba. And I am purposely not going to ask you your thoughts on cod. If you know, you know.
Yes, I know. I do know. I would like some home delivered cod.
I'll send it to you after this webinar.
With a really cool brand.
All right, everyone. Well, I think we're coming up on time. So I want to thank you so much to our incredible panelists, Luba, Ryuta, Charlie, Hatu, and Matthieu, for sharing your insights and giving us this candid look on how global leaders and innovators are navigating the future of food. A huge thank you to everybody who joined us today. I really hope this conversation sparks new ideas and connections as you consider where food and health and technology are heading. I want you all to stay tuned for more food tech future forward events. And until then, keep building, innovating, and shaping the future of food. On behalf of Finn Partners, thank you and have a wonderful day or a good night's sleep, whichever applies to your time zone. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.